Here we go. Your conversations are now being recorded. Yeah. That shouldn't encourage conversations. Actually, somebody's sister in here one day was like, "Oh, is that being recorded?" Oh, yeah, okay. So, yeah. I'm like, yeah, it is. So, all right, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Have touch, please. All quiet, please. Thank you. Go ahead, take out your notes. We're going to continue on and finish up the Falklands War, also known as the Malvinas War. Yes? And then we will continue on after that. We will be doing the war between Iran and Iraq. Those are two different countries. Iran and Iraq, right? They fight each other, and it's nasty and bloody, and so forth and so on. And then, actually, who do we fight in the Persian Gulf War? That's the last one. We won't get to it today, but we'll get to it the week after we come back from the break. No. Iraq. Who was the one who held our embassy personnel hostage in the latter part of the 1970s? You need to know the difference between Iran and Iraq. You're like, aren't they just the same? I mean, hello, their flags look kind of the same. Here's Iran, green and white and red, and there's Iraq, red and white with a green thing and black. Aren't they the same? No. They're right next to each other. There's some very critical differences. Okay? As opposed to, are you listening to something? Oh, you look like you have your music playing. Okay. Okay. All right. Okay. Okay. Yeah. Hello. Yeah. As opposed to Argentina and Britain. Are they even close to each other? No. Which one is closest to the Falklands? Exactly. So you'd think they would win. But they don't. Okay. So you guys ready to dive back into the war? Yes. Okay, so hold off on it, belay that question, and see if it actually comes up, and if you're actually able to do that. All right. So let's get back to it. In the one corner, we have Britain's Iron Lady, daughter of an English grocer, rises up to the top position in the Conservative Party with all kinds of traditional conservatives from higher levels of English society and so forth. And she is from a scrappy middle-class upbringing, and scrappy is the key word. She's scrappy, she's scrappy, she's scrappy. Do you know people in your life that are like, I'm never going to cross them. I'm never going to cross them. Because if I cross them, they're going to push back. That's what the Iron Lady is known for. You don't cross her. Now, of course, sometimes it's kind of like, oh my gosh, seriously, compromise. I mean, meet us part way and so forth. They're like, I don't know. She comes in with an attitude of no. I mean, she can compromise and negotiate on certain various different things, but when it comes to Argentina attacking, taking over militarily territory that they had claimed to, but they didn't have any Argentines actually living there, right? Here in the Falklands. Maggie Thatcher, Prime Minister Thatcher, says no. You ready to get into the details of exactly how this is going to play out? Because it's going to be brief and violent, but not as many casualties, thankfully, as some. But, tell that to the families of the people who end up dead. Because some of them are going to look back and go, really? Seriously? Was it worth the lives that were lost? Was it worth the money that was spent? I don't know. What message do you give to the world? We're just doing like the 1930s in Europe with my 11th grade class. Remember that? Where Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain was meeting with Hitler in Munich in 1938, and Hitler's like, oh, you really don't have any objection to a bunch of German speakers being part of Germany in the Sudetenland? I mean, even though they're really living in Czechoslovakia, I mean, they really should be part of Germany, right? You don't have any objections. What kind of parent will you be someday? You're like, I'm not going to be a parent. When you draw a line and say, this is something we will defend, this is the line, this is my rule, Ashton, are you going to stick to the rules? As a parent, are you going to? If you lay a rule down to your little Ashton Juniors and whatever, what are you going to do when little Ashton Jr. looks at you with just like this beaming face and goes, you know, and breaks the rule, what are you going to do? Wow! You live in another house. That's his kid. You can't come in and discipline his kid. What do you think you are, the United Nations? What are you going to do? Wow. What if, I'm going to say, what if they fall asleep during your, anyway, whatever. It's like, it's like, kid, wake up. I'm talking to you. But, I mean, those are difficult things. What does Margaret Thatcher say to the people of the Falklands that want to be part of Britain? I will defend you. And she's the prime minister. And most of her cabinet was not really excited about that. Write that down. Write it down. A lot of the people in her cabinet were like, this, we should just let them have it. It's going to be really expensive. I don't know if we could really pull this off. I mean, we used to be the British Empire, but now, where most of our resources are focused on Europe. Is that a good enough response for her? Heck no. Make sure you understand her thinking, because it's ultimately going to be prevailing. She is the top commander in the British system. She's the prime minister. Her political party, the Conservative Party, has the majority in Parliament. And they look at this as non-negotiable. We are going to go down there, and we think we can win. And if it costs some lives, then it costs some lives. We're going to be able to pull this off. What was that? What? What? Oh, yes. And some of you may die. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, yeah. Some of you may die. But she's like, this is for Britain. Britain stands for something. Yes, we are a former great imperial empire. And yes, the United States has been like number one in the free world since after World War I. And yeah, they kind of saved our bacon. But by gosh, if the Falklands want to still be in our country, we're going to back it up. All right, you ready for the details? Here we go. The details are, quite visually, right here. The British put together their forces, and they got some forces from Gibraltar. They head down to the south part of the Atlantic, and they're going to be heading toward South Georgia. Right? It's not as much conflict and so forth there. The main conflict there is going to be in and around the Falkland Islands. Let's zoom in on this one. Basically, write this down. Thatcher says, Argentina, really, get your troops out of there. And if you don't, our troops are coming, and our Navy is coming, and our Navy has an Air Force component on it, right? Carrier ships and so forth. They've also got these Harrier jump jets. Have you ever seen those? Those are cool, right? Do you like them or not? They're naughty. I mean, they basically can take off from a fixed position. They go, right? And then they I don't know how it is. This is like engineering and so forth. And then they turn like the engines and so forth, and then it's a jump jet, right? Isn't that cool? I mean, and those are really, really cool kinds of things. Of course, the irony is, write this down, the Argentine military is not too shabby too. In fact, Argentina has implemented their military by purchasing weapons and so forth on the international market. One of the big ships they have in their Navy is a former British naval vessel. Yeah. So it's a pretty good ship. Used to be part of the British Navy, and now it's part of the Argentine Navy. They also have really good missiles, top-line missiles, exocet missiles. You can write that down. Exocet missiles? Those are like ship-killing missiles. Do they have what? Exocet missiles. Missiles, not missiles, missiles. Okay? Figure this out. Raise your hand if you can tell me. Which country sold exocet missiles to Argentina? Nope, not America. Good guess. Not Britain. Another good guess. No, they're not going to be buying Soviet weapons and so forth. Argentina's kind of like on our side-ish during the Cold War, so the Soviets, I mean, if you were looking for stuff. France, write it down. Exocet. They're French missiles. Actually, it's going to be interesting because The 2 times we'll be talking about in the remaining part of this semester, or of this unit, I should say, of exocet missiles, neither time are they actually fired by the French. One time they're going to be fired by the Argentines against the British. It's going to hit a British ship. We'll tell you all about that. Another time later in our next one, the Iran-Iraq War, Iran will be, wait a minute, is Iran? No. Iraq fires an exocet missile because they purchased it from the French, and they fire and hit a U.S. ship. Ooh, that's not very nice. Neither time is it the French. So you can't blame the French. They just sold the really dangerous missiles. Okay? It's not their fault. Whose fault is it if somebody sells somebody else like a gun that is used in a crime? The person who carried out the crime, right? Sometimes the facts matter. Like if you sell a gun to a 5-year-old and it's loaded and so forth, and then a crime happens, I would suppose then the person who sold the gun to the 5-year-old probably is going to have some culpability, wouldn't you think? Yeah. So here's the deal. The British set up a 200-mile war zone. And basically what they're saying is, Argentina, your Navy, we're going to assume that if your Navy is operating within that 200-mile zone around the Falklands, it is enemy, and we will hit it. Yeah, this is going to be war. In the sense the British are saying almost like, okay, Argentina, you started war by taking over our territory, but we're not aiming to hit the mainland part of Argentina. Does that make sense? We're not going to try and hit your seaports or any of your big cities and your land areas and so forth. We're going to aim at the Falklands. But if you're going to send in your Navy and any other resources in there, consider them to be fair game, fair targets. Got it? The biggest casualties, some of the biggest casualties that are going to take place during this war is going to be in the Atlantic. 2 episodes. Write it down. The General Belgrano. It's the name of a ship. It's the Argentine ship that used to be part of the British Navy, and then they retired it and sold it to the Argentine Navy, and Argentina had it, and they were operating in that area. Let me see if I can find out exactly the number of people who perished. 323. It's sunk. The General Belgrano is sunk. Okay? Other ships are lost in that area as well, but that was the biggest loss of life. Let me see, 323. And you look at the details there. Let me see, how many did we have ultimately that were going to die on the Argentine side? 649, and you got about half of them right there in that one. 323, yeah, 323 sailors, servicemen for the Argentine Navy on the General Belgrano. It's a pretty good-sized ship. Okay, and you can see that some of them were able to get off in their life raft and so forth. Okay? Yeah, they were in the zone. Yeah, they were in the combat area. This is before, most of the fighting took place on the land. What does Argentina do in response? Hits the HMS Sheffield. There you go. That's the HMS Sheffield. I think I might have a number of casualties there. Yeah, there's going to be 44 casualties in that particular one. It's not sunk, I don't believe, but you can see it's in flames. And that is the exocet missile that's fired by the Argentines. They had purchased it. It's a really high-quality missile. It's a ship killer missile. You can fire at it from some distance. Very sophisticated, very deadly. Okay? It's the British. So when you hear people saying, oh my gosh, Thatcher, you shouldn't have done that, this is the danger, this is war. Okay? But the key thing that's ultimately going to wrap it up are the battles that take place. Here we go. Let's go back to this map. The battles that take place on the land. The Argentine forces had been put in there. They weren't really super well equipped, and a lot of them are going to be pretty not as well motivated, pretty quick to surrender, ultimately. The British land forces on the beaches in the Falklands on May 21st. It's over by June 14th. There's some battles, there's some battles here, there's some battles here. Most of it occurs kind of in this region, and then it wraps up in the city of Stanley. I don't know if you call it city of Stanley, since the population of the entire island group is much less than the population of Star, Idaho, right? I mean, it's a community of Stanley as opposed to the little community of Darwin and so forth. Yeah.
So it starts on May 21st, they sent troops on May 21st, and it ended on
June 14th, yeah. So the troops landed on May 21st. The assault is completed by June 14th. Got it? So Britain won. There you go. Britain won. Argentina still claims that territory. But are they willing to do anything about it to follow up on that? No. So, I mean, it's still on the records as like, yeah, that's ours. They'll still call it Malvinas. And it's fascinating because this map, I'm not sure, let me see, 2007, the map was copyrighted. It has Falkland Islands, UK, parentheses, Islas Malvinas, close parentheses. So the map maker is going, okay, well, you know, whatever. I don't want to get into a fight. You know, we're going to sell this map in Argentina. I suppose the Argentines would prefer that their name is not in parentheses, but whatever. I suppose you can win a war then. Okay, what is another aftermath? Well, politically, and we saw this is kind of a political war. Why did Maggie Thatcher, the Iron Lady, send the troops down there? To prove a point. This is the British, this is Britain, and you do not hit us, and we will hit you back. And I mean, that is a solid point. Some people can be cynical and go, well, you know, when your popularity is not doing very well in your country because of economic and da-da-da-da-da, wage a war, you know? I mean, it's kind of a joke. We're not really serious about it. When the United States is going through difficult times, it's like, let's attack Canada. You know, it's like, what? I mean, it's just ridiculous. But, I mean, that happens sometimes in history. You get, like, you know, some ruthless power. It happened here, I would say. Argentina probably wouldn't have taken over the Falklands if it wasn't for the really, really horrible situation that Galtieri and his crew were in. I mean, the economy was just a shambles. How did it work out for Galtieri? Very badly. Let's go ahead and point out Galtieri. That one's easy. By 1983, so like within a year after the war, the junta had failed. He had resigned. Let me see, what are they going to set up to do that? With a lot of encouragement from other countries, they're going to try democracy again. So they do that. They're going to try democracy again. Good. And I want to say that Argentina has stuck with democracy since then, right? One of the things they did is they conducted a big investigation as to what actually was going on during the junta. And that was where, like last time I told you about like that Air Force officer was like, man, I got to get this off my chest, and I'm going to, you know. And a lot of this is sort of like truth and reconciliation. Some of the people involved in some of the atrocity types of things are going to be given kind of a pass. Not everyone's going to be thrown in jail. Just so that people know what happened to so many of those disappeared young people. Well, the Air Force officer gave the answer. They were dumped in the Atlantic Ocean, alive. I'm not sure. It may be true, but I'm not familiar with it. I mean, the Argentine Navy and the British Navy were both pretty good navies, but the British was, you know, a little bit more superior. And the forces that they had, they were able to bring onto the land fight were superior. And the United States gave some intelligence support. I'm not sure about aluminum ships. Send me a link. If you can find something, I'd be interested to hear something about that. You know? Yes? Junta is basically sort of like a Latin American version of military committee. It's military dictatorship. Junta. It's a Spanish word. I don't know. You guys run into that at all? Together? Yeah. Yeah, it's like a council. One of the things in a lot of Latin American histories where you have military dictators come over, a lot of times it's like, well, we have a group of, you know, generals and officers and so forth, typically, like in here, you got the one guy who's, the leader of it, but it's typically like a committee. And that goes all the way back to the early 1800s, where juntas took charge even like during the time of the independence movements. What about Maggie Thatcher? What's going to happen with her? Did it work out for her? You can say she did it for resolve reasons and so forth, but how did it play out for her politically? What happens to a country that goes to war, loses some people, but wins the war? Her popularity went up. Okay? When the fleet came back to Britain, hurrah, hurrah, hurrah! Everyone's cheering it on. The country feels good about it. It's kind of like, woo, boom, boom. We won a war. We did it by ourselves. Whatever. She was reelected. Her party was reelected in the next national elections in 1984. Okay? And they're actually going to win another round. And then eventually public opinion turns against her, and she resigns, or actually she's removed from, isn't that weird? In Britain, you can actually remove somebody from the prime minister job without having to have a national election. The Conservative Party removed her as the prime minister and put somebody else in there. Yeah, it was her own party. Yeah, because they were sizing it up. This is going to be like, I'm trying to remember the exact date. It was like 89 or something. So this is a fair amount of time after this. And her popularity had gone down, and her party's like, what are we going to do in order to win the next election? We're going to dump Maggie. Ooh, wow. But she didn't get dumped in 82. She led him to victory in 84. And partly because of success in war. Got it? All right. I think we've got all the details there. And now I'm going to play a little video for you, which I think is really cool because it kind of recaps everything from a British perspective. And you're forewarned, ready? Watch the thing, but do not freak out and no longer pay attention if you have an old British man who doesn't clip his eyebrows or his cheeks. Right? You promised me? Right? Didn't I have to castigate you guys like last year when there was like some guy who somebody from like the early part of the Cold War and he had a really high-pitched voice? Yeah, remember? And I showed you that Dutch interviewer? Yeah.
And he couldn't stop laughing?
Did I show you that this year? I thought that was last year. You didn't see the interview, right? With a guy who was talking to people who had like surgeries and they like cut off their vocal thing and they were talking really high and he started laughing at him like while he was interviewing them. Oh, yeah. This school year. No, he didn't. He didn't. That was a scene from like the early Cold War. We did the early Cold War. Oh, okay. All right, fair enough. That's right, because we did the early Cold War on camera, whatever. So, yeah. I did that. All right, so, promise. You will not. I realize this is not going to work out. Like, if you don't want a kid to cross the road, you don't say, don't cross the road, because what do they hear? Cross the road, right? So if I tell you, don't laugh when you hear an old British guy talk about the Falklands War, and he's got I'm serious. Those are those are brows. Gentlemen, I don't know about ladies, but gentlemen, someday you can look forward to it. Your hair will not naturally take care of itself. It will grow from all kinds of places, including your eyebrows, and it will be they'll come to life. Anyway, this will make you pay attention. It's pretty good. So it's about just under 8 minutes. Here is a recap of the Falklands War.
Just 30 years ago,
His eyebrows are okay. They're plucked.
1982, Margaret Thatcher announced the end of one of the strangest episodes in post-war British history. She did so just over my shoulder here in a crowded, excited House of Commons.
House of Commons.
Talks are now in progress about the surrender of the Argentine forces on East and West Falklands.
Yeah.
What Thatcher formally confirmed was what by that stage the world already knew, that the Argentine garrison on the Falkland Islands had surrendered to a numerically smaller British invasion force.
They're the Falklanders. The sheep were much more restrained in their...
Militarily
Appreciation.
had been achieved in just 74 days by a British task force of 127 ships, 42 warplanes, and 35,000 men that had steamed 8,000 miles into a South Atlantic winter to defeat an enemy just 400 miles from its own home base. Defence analyst Robert Fox, then of the BBC, was there.
Mortars firing behind me, making porridge in the morning and said, the RSA, four back to mine, a terrific guy. They said, no, you haven't got the time for that. They're surrendering, we're going in. And we started down the track, and it was like an ash painting, leaden sky, snow on the ground.
Raise your hand if you see a tree.
10 metres behind the famous iconic.
I don't think you will.
But the Marine is packed. I didn't even check.
June the 14th was a pretty boisterous evening, in contrast to weeks of strain and tension. As diplomacy went wrong, ships were sunk.
It's the Sheffield.
On both sides. As the Guardian's then sketch writer, I was in the Commons Press Gallery the night of the surrender, as I had been on the day it started, Friday, April the 2nd. That day, the boot was on the other foot. It was a humiliating day for Britain, as ministers denied what Buenos Aires had been telling the world for hours, that troops belonging to the junta, led by
Junta.
Leopoldo Galtieri, had finally made good their threat to retake what they regard as Las Malvinas. Or as Rex Hunt, the British governor in Port Stanley, put it rather more succinctly, as the troops came up the beach, it looks as if the buggers really mean it. Bernadine was Mrs. Thatcher's number 10 press secretary.
John Knott came along to tell Margaret Thatcher that the Argentinian fleet had set sail, and he then informed her that the view of the Ministry of Defence was that if the islands were taken, they could not be recovered. Well, I mean, she put on a passable imitation of that chap who said, I could not believe.
Listen, pay attention.
For Mrs. Thatcher, not yet the world figure she became, it all meant potential disaster. Foreign Office, MOD, they were both against reconquest, but she was lucky.
You have that in your notes, right?
Sir Henry Leach, head of the Navy,
Among the British, not everyone was in agreement that they should fight.
Can we take the islands back? Yes, we can, said Leach. Cecil Parkinson was the distinctly civilian Tory party chairman, a rising Thatcherite star, soon to find himself sitting with the generals and admirals in Thatcher's war cabinet.
A cabinet met on the Friday evening, and Margaret went round the table asking each member of the cabinet for their opinion. And only one member of the cabinet, John Diffin, said, we can't take them back, let's negotiate. The rest all said, following Henry Leach's assurance, let's send the task force to sea.
And with that, the task force sailed within days.
That's a jump jet.
Thatcher, in the Ministry of Defence, had shown they meant business. But as the conflict escalated and diplomacy gave way to overt acts of war, then came the entire period's most controversial decision. Cecil Parkinson was there.
The sinking of the Belgrano was a critical moment because the Belgrano had the capacity to sink a carrier, and its orders were to sink a carrier. That's why it was at sea. The net result was many more lives were lost than we expected to have lost. And we took no pleasure in that.
The Sun might famously have proclaimed gotcha, but 368 lives had been lost, and in the safety of the Commons, we suddenly knew it was all going to be serious. Sure enough, 2 days later, May the 4th, the destroyer Sheffield was struck by an Exocet missile from an Argentine fighter and later sank.
Oh,
The
sorry, it
weekend
did sink.
before the task force
Probably
landed,
intentionally.
Things became really tense. I can remember Max Hastings at a lunch just bending a fork like that. Everybody, I mean, the hacks as much as anybody, just wanted to get on with it.
The perilous landings duly began on May 21st. after the sinking of the Atlantic conveyor, mistaken for a carrier but actually carrying 16 Chinook helicopters, the soldiers would have to march across the bleak, treeless islands. They called it Yomping. When the collapse came, after UK forces had captured the strategic hills overlooking Stanley during fierce fighting, it came suddenly. There would be no dramatic last stand for General Mendoza in Port Stanley, or for his tired, cold, demoralised and mostly conscript army.
Oh, now they're coming back to London.
Unlike some later wars, there was a pretty solid British consensus that this one had been worth fighting. There'd been unprovoked aggression by a fairly nasty regime, which paid the price of failure. Argentina got its democracy back, and Mrs. Thatcher benefited too, of course.
I've been going abroad with ministers from 1970, and frankly, in the 70s, we were clapped out. We were a damnation. They didn't want to know. Once she demonstrated a resolution over the economy and the Falklands, everybody wanted to talk to her.
Today's armed forces, bloodied and battered, its troop numbers slashed to save money, its equipment budgets eviscerated. If the Argentine saber-rattling now going on suddenly turned nasty, they simply couldn't take the Falklands back again as they did last time. On the other hand, that's what they said last time too.
Ooh, so don't try it, Argentina. If you want to compete with Britain, here's the closing remarks for that. If you want to compete with Britain, keep it on the pitch. Soccer, right? That's the way to solve it. Is Argentina pretty good in soccer? Yeah, they're very good in soccer. Is Britain, or actually it's tough to say Britain because in World Cup competitions, the United Kingdom actually fields at least 3 teams. Scotland's got a team. Wales, I think, do they have a team? I don't know. England is the team name. And they're pretty good, although, Mary, who would you say you would pick in a typical match between Argentina and England? Yeah, I think probably Argentina. I don't know where they went in the, I think when Brazil hosted the World Cup game where they famously were decimated by Germany in the semifinal game. Did you ever watch that? Where it's like typically, what's the score in soccer? 0-0. Oh wait, 1-0 or 2-0. But in the Brazil-Germany game, it was, I want to say like 6-0 in the first half. It was crazy. And it was even worse because not only was Brazil kicked out in the semifinal, but their chief rival, Argentina, won their semifinal match and went on to the final game in the World Cup. But Germany won that year. Okay? Put this down to wrap it up. 1989, Britain and Argentina normalize their relations. They restore their relations. So this is what, like some 7 years after the war. They restore their relations and agree to disagree with respect to ownership of the Falklands. Argentina obviously would be stupid to try and like take it over again. But why did they try, Rodrigo? Why did they try the first time? Well, they wanted it. They've been wanting it for a while. But why did Galtieri make the decision to send in the army? He was the type of person. Frank, what was one of the reasons motivating Galtieri to just wage a little war? How was his country doing before the war? Back to Rodrigo. What would be one of the indicators of the bad economy in Argentina at that time? Like 600% inflation rate? You think? You guys could not handle 600% inflation rate. When I was your age, the inflation rate, I think, was bumping up sometimes into like 10 or maybe 15% at times, and that was crazy. That was really bad. It's kind of like, it's not going to help their economy. But it's a distraction. It's kind of like why like during the time of the Cold War, check this. Sports teams in the communist-dominated countries, they're good. Why? Because if you've got a really good sports team and you're in an international competition and you win, you're just like, I got something to talk about. I might not be getting very much money or I'm not be doing very well, but woo, howdy. Check out that Soviet hockey team. Man, they got gold again and again, and except for in 1980. But I mean, yeah. And I mean, eventually it's ridiculous because, I mean, like, what happened? Is it fair in sports to supplement your physical intake of chemicals and so forth beyond just natural food additives and so forth? Yeah, I mean, it's not fair. And literally, I want to say like the East German swimmers and so forth, the women's swimming team, they were so socked up on steroids, it was ridiculous. But it made them faster, and they were just like, boom, they were winning things left and right. American female swimmers are like, that's not fair. Her best time like a year ago was such and such, and now it's like crazy. And have you looked at her? Anyway, so they're much, much more careful nowadays to check on like the use of like steroids and other kinds of performance-enhancing drugs. Is that what PEDs? Yeah. So they'll test you. Do they do that in NCAA? Yeah, for like if you're going to be performing on NCAA, do they like do tests, drug tests, and so forth? I think they do. I know international competitions and so forth do. I don't know. Do they do it in the high school? No. It's high school. Psh, I'm ready. Boom, boom. All right, I'm gonna. Anyway, but that, I mean, that's the thing. If you can't get your economy going well and so forth, at least make sure your sports teams are good, because then your population will be like, yeah, I'm unemployed. I don't have this going on and so forth, but boom. Tampa, Tom Brady. Yeah, you know, it's a distraction. Okay, and this happens sometimes. And it's actually going to be part of the reason why we get to the next competition. All right, you ready? The next war. Let's get started with it because this is going to be yeah, very sad. We're going to have lots and lots and lots and lots of people die. Iran, Iraq, the war, 1980 to 1989. 1980, 1989, let's see, casualty numbers, 500,000 soldiers. Yeah, well, this is, type, nature, and combatants in the war. Okay? 1980, 1988. Look in the handout. Whatever. Okay, bottom half of page 2. Okay, 1980 to 1988. So this is going to be taking place in the context of the Cold War. But it's a weird one because you got 500,000 civilian casualties too. So this is not a fun one. A lot of people dead. Okay? And in this particular war, the two countries that are going to be fighting are, easy to remember, Iran and Iraq. What? Yes, I was going to point that out. Who would the United States be cheering for if, you ready? Iraq is a friend of the Soviets. Write that down. Iraq is a friend of the Soviets. Iran used to be a friend of the United States until this guy, the Ayatollah, think of this like, that would be like a pope type title for within the context of that particular offshoot within Islam. The Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini, or just simply the Ayatollah Khomeini, there he is on the front page of Time magazine. Who would the United States be cheering for? I'll tell you what, you can write this down. There are a lot of people in the United States, when this war was taking place, they're like, you suck, Iran. You took our people hostage. There were a lot of very strong feelings against Iran in the United States. This is important you think about this because then when you look at Iraq, you're like, well, if I hate this person so much, the other guy might not be that bad. It's kind of like in World War II. Who do we really hate in World War II? Yeah, of course. So that means Stalin is not as bad. You know, he's not Hitler. I mean, Hitler's terrible. When are we going to find out who is the leader of Iraq? I mean, who is the leader of Iraq? Oh, that guy. Oh, man. It's like we're ever going to go to war with him twice. We do. We go to war with twice. But during the Iran-Iraq War, he kind of picks up this jibe from the United States that, oh, nothing I could do would be so bad to make the United States hate me more than they hate these guys. And this guy, Hussein, this is going to be a nice one, because this war we're going to do here, the Iran-Iraq War, is going to flow right into the Persian Gulf War. Okay? You're going to wrap up one, and it'll flow right into the next one. And Saddam Hussein is going to make some of the biggest stupid decisions ever in the history of leaders of country. First one is invading Iran, because it's going to not work. There's going to be no winner. You can write that down. There's going to be no winner in the Iran-Iraq War. Just a lot of dead people. And then he's going to attack Kuwait because he thinks the United States would be okay with that. No, the United States is not okay with it. We're going to kick him all over the place and kick him out of Kuwait. And then, it's not in your notes, but we will talk about it later on. And then he's going to be required to, allow inspectors to see whether there are weapons of mass destruction, and he's going to cut that off. And who's that going to make feel really unsettled, especially after 9/11? And we're really concerned about weapons of mass destruction getting into the hands of the wrong guys and so forth. The United States of America, we're going to be really concerned about that in 2003. And what is that going to justify? Since he's not showing us weapons of mass destruction, he's not allowing us to go in there to see that he doesn't have them, and then we're going to attack him in 2003. Boom. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And the irony is this, it's did they have weapons of mass destruction? No. Well then, dude, why don't you just let us in and look around and see them? Stupid is as stupid does. He actually, probably the best analysis of this, and I'll explain this again later as we go through this, probably the best analysis is he's well, I don't want the Iranians to know I don't have weapons of mass destruction because they're my main enemy. You fought Iran to a tie, dude. The United States beat you quick in the Persian Gulf War, and you're going to upset them again in 2003, within a couple years after 9/11, and everyone's freaking out about, what could possibly happen? He ends up dead, by the way. No, we don't. We capture him, we find him, and we hand him over to the Iraqi government that's in place at that time that hates him, as we will see. Because he's going to be the leader of Iraq, but there's going to be a sizable portion of his country that hates him. And they will, after a long trial where he's blah, 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 he's finally convicted, they finally carry out a sentence. They're not supposed to film it, but they do. And the people who are in charge of the detail of carrying out the execution, they're going to be ripping into him and saying all kinds of stuff, and then they drop him at the end of a rope. And it is. What's that? It's casualty, 500,000 total. So, take a percentage of that as far as number dead. And then we'll see a whole bunch on the other side as well. Iran versus Iraq. Yeah. Should we wrap up? Yeah, we'll get to all the details and so forth there. It's complicated. It's interesting. Yeah. Iran, Iraq, and then we'll do the Persian Gulf War. We'll touch on the Iraq War. I'm thinking we'll wrap this up clearly at some point next week when we get back. But have a great break, okay? All righty then.